we're really getting under the bonnet here, looking at the minutiae of the EDP, and we're missing the bigger picture. And I rise to speak in support of the Noble Lord Cromwell on 307A, but also 256 in the name of Lord Roburgh. Now we find ourselves in this situation because the organisations with the statutory duties, the statutory powers, the staff, the income, the systems to clean up our rivers, insofar as nutrient neutrality is concerned, haven't been doing so. DEFRA, the Environment Agency, Natural England, the water companies in particular, drainage boards are all in scope. They've got their job and they haven't been doing it. And I think my concern about the levy, because we're talking about how we're going to charge this levy, but we're not really talking about where the money's coming from to deliver these EDPs, because what Part 3 is effectively doing is letting these statutory undertakings off the hook. Instead, those people who don't have the powers, responsibilities, like councils and local developers. And if my friend Lady Neville Rolfe was in her place, I'm sure she'd intervene and say, and the small builders, those small companies that spend money on local supply chains and what have you. So we've got here the ultimate moral hazard. It's the reward for failure. Now, I don't deny that the costs of doing these EDPs should be apportioned appropriately across the canvas that is required for the purposes of the EDP and in proportion to the number of units it's going to sell. But I'm disappointed that this bill doesn't require those with the responsibilities to, if you like, have the first pull. DEFRA, the Environment Agency, and so forth. So I think, and it's an omission, and I think it's one we should place on the record and return to later at report stage. But I do want to question the Noble Lord, Lord Cromwell, because he talks about the surplus. And in a previous group, my lords, I explained how I've been involved in this for some time. And there will be no surplus, because we are talking about 80-year tail liabilities. The money that's ponied up front to deliver an environmental improvement is going to have to be jam spread over 80 years in the case of nutrient neutrality, or 30 years in the case of biodiversity net gain, and whatever other regulations come along. So we're not going to know whether there's enough money in the kitty until year 79. And I don't think this is really fully understood. People and other noble lords in previous groups have given numbers. The Earl of Caithness earlier spoke about 1,900 versus 2,300, and he was concerned on the current account, if you like, on this year's P&L, what the extra margin might be. But, my lords, there's been a fundamental misunderstanding of how the accountancy works. And that's why in an earlier group, I want to explain, and I will talk about in a later group when we get to the private involvement. We need to have proper accounting standards of how we're going to approach accounting for these 80-year tail liabilities. But nevertheless, until we do, when we're setting this levy, it should be on the basis that those who are required to and paid to do this work should carry the first burden. Otherwise, what we're doing is having those small family building businesses cross-subsidising the large water companies who raise water rates and should be upgrading their own sewage plants. And instead, the owners and the purchasers of new homes, young families, trying to get their foot on the ladder, are effectively going to be cross-subsidising. These EDPs should be explicit in asking those who are paid and have the duties to do this work to do it first, and then if there's any requirement left over thereafter, that's what's got to be apportioned over for the developers and in due course passed on to the purchasers of new homes. So I think we've only really, in this group, scratched the surface about the costs and the accountancies and the financial models. We need to do a lot more work on this, because otherwise the money's going to run out in year 42, 52, doesn't really matter. We're not going to get to year 80. And in the meantime, those costs of the EDP, the annual inspection costs, all the renewals and the accountancy and everything else, haven't been factored in at all. This is not at all straightforward. And I think as we get to report stage, we're going to have to dig much, much more deeply into this. Who pays, who should pay, how are we going to value these tail liabilities? It's almost an actuarial problem. But until we do, there will be no money to go back to anybody, my noble friend.
Very briefly, because I found that a fascinating exposition, and I would very happily discuss it further outside the chamber with the noble lord. I think the logical corollary of it is it's almost impossible to calculate, therefore, what the levy should be, because you're dealing with unknowns into an 80-year period. But let's not discuss it now. Let's move on. Thank you.